So thank you everybody for joining us. This is a Women in Media event with Deborah Anderson from the Herald. However, to encourage diversity, we have included other members of the faculty and courses. So we have invited some gentlemen here today. Welcome, boys. Thank you very much for joining us. So Women in Media, obviously, we like to include everybody. And as Deborah is such an experienced journalist, we wanted to make sure that everybody had the chance to talk to her. So Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. If you could just maybe start by telling us how you got into the industry, that would be great.
Hello, everyone. Hi, thanks for having me. Well, yes, quite a traditional route, which started even before it was a case of applying for college courses. I grew up with it. My father worked for the Herald, and anyone who has a relative in journalism knows that it can be all consuming. It kind of runs the life, the family, the shifts come first, the stories come first. So I was always aware that it was a role at that point that had quite unsocial hours. Everything stopped for news really. So as a young age, I was, very into current affairs. It was something that was a great interest. So when it came to those ideas, when you're kind of first and second year and they band about what you might want to do, I think it was used to call it guidance lessons or guidance classes. And we went round, and for me, there was the obvious answer, the only answer, and I said I wanted to be a journalist. Didn't really need to think about it at all. But I was at a school that was quite academically driven. They were very into having just, kind of numbers, making sure that, every year group went through from, say, 5th year, 6th year, they wanted those results through to higher education. So I can remember at the time people saying, well, it's very hard to get into, there's not many college courses, there's not many places. Is there something else you'd like to do? Put me down another route. But I stuck with it, and because I did know how, what courses were available. And they were right at that time, which I hate to say is 30 years ago. There was only really one place you could go, and that was Edinburgh Napier, which at the time was a polytechnic. I think my first year it was a college, and the second year it was a university. But obviously that's now well established in its university role. So there was one place you could go at that point, and that was a HND 2-year course, which had grown from years before when it was mostly block release. So having the 2-year quite intensive course covering most aspects that you would need, law, shorthand. In fact, you didn't even get your diploma if you didn't have shorthand. That was the big stick. Then there was news writing features and a little bit of broadcast. And our lecturers, we were led by people who had, been in the newspaper industry, some in broadcast. We had lawyers come in and take our lectures. So it was quite a fast pace. There wasn't a lot of free time in the timetable, I seem to remember. But I think we were all very keen, we were already eager to get out there. So I did 2 years at Napier, and then I did the route of weeklies. Worked my way up through various local titles, from the Carrick Gazette in Girvan, which I sadly don't think does it exist any longer. And then made the big move to the Largs News. And then I moved to the Ayrshire Post, which was quite a flagship local title at the time. But I really enjoyed those years, apart from the fact that now when I look back, I made a lot of friendships. And, I think a lot of us were all starting out in our careers, some of which I work with now, or even, work, maybe in different papers, but we still have a link and a connection. But they were great times because you were really embedded in the community you worked in. I always worked there. I had digs in Girvan, winters, weather, and I had a place in Largs and place in Ayr. So I lived there and got to know people very well. And in those days, it was a case of, you're in the local pub and the community council right by there. And, you're covering district courts. And obviously you move your way up to sheriff and then high court. but it was a great background, a great starting point. You also find that as we were on our way up, other journalists might have been going in a different direction. They might already have done the dailies and had their careers, but were maybe quite enjoying a time on weekly newspapers, which I must say, I still have huge respect for. I think they're amazing assets for communities, and I enjoyed serving my time there for many years before then making the change up to nationals. And you're always trying to get your name known, get your name out there, and we used to do that by shift work, freelance work. You would maybe get a wee tap and you'd end up with the Record and the Sunday Mail. So I did that for quite some time, and then I ended up in the Evening Times, which I was always quite shocked at because it's an early start. However, I soon realised that was the only shift to be one was the early shift. We had a 6 a.m. reporting shift, and you were out all day, every day really. We had 3 live editions, and at this point there's no internet, so you're printing first. You're obviously trying to be first at any scene or any door, and we could be doing a 8:30 edition, 11 o'clock and 2, so it was all quite fast paced. And I was at the Times for almost 20 years, and then I didn't move too far, but I moved over to the Herald, where I've been for the last couple of years now. Obviously different type of stories, different breadth, area, and it's come at a nice time as well.
Lovely, thank you, Deborah. I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to sort out our bank questions for us.
Perfect, thanks, Deborah. That was fantastic, really informative. First of all, we're coming across to Heather for question number 1.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Yes, I was thinking about this one. Well, the thing I came up with is that probably go with your gut instinct. On many occasions, I suppose it's, with the benefit of hindsight and wisdom experience, you could say, well, what would I change? But maybe we're not really meant to change that much. And so for me, I think going with your gut instinct is about your approach, what you work on, how you adapt. 9 times out of 10, you will be right, because you'll be there making the right decisions for yourself at the right time in your careers, or whether it be a particular story or assignment you're on. And I think it's just, trusting your intuition and trusting yourself. Probably, I would say that when I've relied on my gut instinct, and I can maybe probably relate it to, stories I've been on, sometimes you have a split second to make your mind up about something. We in fact, we used A to Z to get to places and to find people. And at times you would maybe be in a street and literally your news editor's telling you to knock every door. But you just get a feel for things. And you do have that instinct that kicks in. So I would say that, going with my gut, most of the time, led me to the right place, and worked out for the better. So I think that it's just that it's, go with your gut instinct, because, it probably will be the right answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're coming across to Molly.
Have you ever had imposter syndrome? If so, how did it affect you, and how did you address it?
Imposter syndrome. It's quite an in thing, that, isn't it now? Imposter syndrome. I did think about it, but I would maybe look at it in a different way, because I think imposter syndrome, you're implying that you think you're not good enough to be in a position or apply for a position. But I would maybe call it stage fright, because it's that feeling of perhaps a new job or going to interview someone, that if you do have those butterflies and you do feel a little bit like, oh my goodness, am I ready for this? Is this the right thing? I think you need that, because it means that what you're doing is very important to you. The person that maybe goes in and appears on the surface, to have all the answers or all the confidence, that might not be the case. It might be front, but if you're going on an assignment, or you're starting, it's your first day in a new job, or you're getting promotion, and you do have that obviously self-doubt that is very natural and most people have, but I think it's very important, because that self-doubt and that it's what drives you on. It's what keeps you alert. It gives you that edge. So I think if it's imposter syndrome or kind of stage fright, I would say it's probably quite a good thing to have. Yes, there have been times where I've maybe gone applied for jobs, and interviews might have been nerve-wracking. You might have had quite a big panel, but I think you have to push yourself, and you probably, most people will know when is the right time to go for a new job or to take on a new challenge. But it's just having that little bit of butterflies, I think, helps get you places, because it does show how important it is to you. Use it to your advantage rather than think it's a bad thing.
No, that's a really good point. If we could hear from Belinda now, please.
Hi. If you were to recruit an intern or employ someone, what would be the key criteria you would look for?
Well, yeah, I've had the pleasure of carrying out quite a number of interviews over the years for hiring staff in different roles. Obviously, when you are looking for the experience, to back up a position they're applying for. But I think for me, it's integrity, openness, getting a feel for someone. The talent, obviously the talent has to be there, the ability, but also it's knowing that potential in someone. You're maybe not, you're hiring someone on the potential of what they could do, what they could bring to your organization. So someone who's just got, that drive and that passion, which can speak volumes in an interview. If you're interviewing someone for a role and you're just not getting anything back, then probably they're in the wrong place. But someone that's really committed and passionate, is someone that you want to bring onto your team. They might not have all the skills that they're required at that point, but you're hoping to be able to work with that individual to bring on those skills, to bring them on so that they can progress in their career. And it's just about giving someone that opportunity and recognizing that they've either already got that talent base, or that it's something that's just there waiting to be developed. And that's quite exciting as well, because we've had quite a lot of young people that have come through the Evening Times and gone on to different papers or digital outlets, and I think that's always quite a big compliment. If someone comes to you and then does really well and then gets headhunted somewhere else, then I always like to think that's a compliment on us, that we've done a right job with them as well.
Great. Can we hear from Lucette now, please?
What would you like to see changed in your profession that would improve career opportunities for women, and how would you support other women?
Well, I suppose I've been in the industry 30 years. I'm fortunate. I'm not that old that I think in the 50s and 60s, there was definitely the place for females in the editorials. If they were lucky, was simply writing for the women's page, and I'm glad to see that that's we have progressed and that has changed. I think at times perhaps either the flexibility in roles can be a bit of an obstacle for women in particular, who might want to move up the ranks. But I'm hoping that the last 2 years we've had in terms of flexible working, through the pandemic, is that employers do realise that, well, most people can adapt and work hours around family life, as we've all had to, or it doesn't have to be family life, it could be any other, commitment or volunteer work or interest. Sometimes in our industry, if you're perhaps, different roles can fit different people at, certain times in their career. We've got, I do love writing, and it's a fantastic part of the job. And I've got colleagues who, for them, that's exactly what they want to do. That's why they came into the industry. That's why they wanted to be a journalist, is to write, to interview people, and to break those stories. And for them, climbing further up the ladder in terms of the career, or going into positions of management, it just isn't something that they feel is a kind of marker of their career. But I do think there needs to be some kind of a balance as to higher positions, and why perhaps women are put off by it. But certainly, I hope that there's enough encouragement out there, enough networks now, either through mentoring schemes, or our doors are always open, that women shouldn't be put off going for any role. And I suppose now we need to recognise that if there is something that doesn't quite fit, that hopefully they've got enough confidence to talk about that with future employers as well.
And last but not least, Leah.
What has been your proudest achievement of your career?
I think I'm proud that I'm quite in a unique position that that I'm still doing the job that I love, day in, day out. As I said at the start, for me, there was only one thing, and that was journalism. And also my background, is primarily coming up through print journalism. So I think I'm very proud that I'm still able to do the job I love today. And I've had various roles within that. I've been a reporter, I've been a news editor, which is very privileged position. And leading a team is a great feeling, especially when you get that team working together. But lately I've been involved in the project to create Scotland's COVID Memorial. The Herald launched a campaign 2 years ago, when we were still right in the middle of the pandemic, coming out of one of the first lockdowns. And we launched a campaign to create a memorial to people lost during the pandemic. And just last week, actually, 2 years on, we gathered with families who'd lost loved ones in Pollock Country Park to see work begin on that memorial. So to be part of that, to be part of that Herald campaign, which I think is a legacy for the paper, and I think it's a very important thing that they've embarked on. To be involved in that, something that perhaps will bring some comfort and some healing to people, throughout the past 2 years, has been horrendous. I think that has to really be my proudest moment.
Lovely, thank you, Deborah. That does sound very special. Okay, so we're now going to open questions up to the floor. If you just want to unmute yourself and ask away. Who's going to
I wanted to ask a wee question. I was having a conversation the other day about confidence and how sometimes people can look at it as a negative word. Whenever people are like, oh, you're confident to me, I'm like, oh, that's a really disgusting word and I don't want it to be used sometimes, because I think sometimes it can be seen as arrogance. Is that something you ever worried about, walking into a room with a lot of confidence? I think especially in women, it can sometimes be perceived in the wrong way. Was that ever anything you worried about, especially in the start of your career?
Well, funny enough, I would say at the start of my career, I suppose I was walking into quite small offices, so there wasn't too many people. But I do remember the first few shifts in national newspapers. You know, when you're walking into a newsroom with a cast of thousands, probably a lot of household names, some legends in their own lunch hour, as we used to say. You know, when you walked in there, you tried to just, I remember you just tried to put on a bit of confidence and, walk in as tall as I could, which for me is not great. But I don't know, I suppose that it comes with experience, and it comes every time you go out in a job and you get the result, and then your name's in the paper, and then especially in a shift pattern, because you're only as good as your last shift or your last story, so that if you get asked back. But when you keep getting asked back and you keep getting those stories and you keep getting your name in the paper, then I think that's where your confidence comes. I mean, I think we've all probably seen it. There might be two people that will walk in, at the same time. Someone might be striding ahead, full of confidence, but there might be someone else who doesn't. But it doesn't mean to say that either of them have more skills. I think that the news editors and the bosses can easily recognise who does have the talent. It doesn't matter if you walk in, as the most confident person. It's the results that matter, and that's not always the person that shouts the loudest that gets the great story.
Thank you. I've just seen one in the chat here from Jem, who's one of our radio students. What do you think of the phrase "fake it until you make it"? Do you think it's helpful advice?
Fake it until you make it? No. It's not helpful advice, and no, I don't like it at all. Fake it until you make it. No, not at all. I mean, the whole reason that you're going through this training and that you're hopefully going on placements, to do your chosen career is because you can recognise it's your passion, that it's something you believe that you can be very good at. I don't think you actually need to fake anything. What I think you need is to prove just how good you could be to a newsroom. Maybe some people faked it, it's got them somewhere, but I think I'm sure you'll all have talent and you'll all have great careers ahead of you. So I don't really think there'd be any need to fake anything.
Okay, another question. I have a dog that's snoring behind me, so apologies for that. If I mute myself, that's why.
I had a wee question. You spoke about quickly about the first time you saw your name published. How did it feel the first time you got your own article published and you saw your name printed there?
It feels, as special as it does today. I'm trying to think where my first byline would have been. I think it might have been actually in a free newspaper at the time that was attached to the Paisley Gazette. So it would have been the Paisley People, and I'm from Renfrewshire, so I did some work experience, and in the summer many moons ago, probably the early 90s, at the Paisley and Renfrewshire Gazette. And then the editor at the time was they were saying they were short staffed, and she said, are you free for the next 3 weeks? And she paid me 30 quid a week, and I was delighted. But I think that's when I first saw my name in print, and it's quite a long name, especially if it's a single column, so to get Deborah Anderson in. But it's fantastic, and even now, when I do stories and I see my byline, you see it in the Herald now, it doesn't change. It is a thrill, and it's a fantastic feeling.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes left. Any other questions?
Deborah, you talk very fondly about your experience and where you started in local press. So how valuable how much did that prepare you for making the jump from local community news into the nationals and the dailies? Well,
I mean, for me it was invaluable. You were able to cut your teeth. You were able to make mistakes, and certainly we at times we did. And I suppose a slightly smaller readership, smaller scale. But you know, at that point in advice, our course was quite closely aligned with NCTJ, which was the, you know, kind of national, you know, training body at the time, and the way into the, you know, the industry at that point, yeah, very much was through weekly newspapers. So for me, there was, you know, that was the only route, and I didn't. You don't think we could fast track then? Because I think if you try to you know, to wing it, you know, trying to get a job somewhere else, you know, you'd be told, you know, we'll come back in a couple of years, you know. And as you know, as I said, even in Girvan, which was a tiny town, you know, we had a district court once a month. You had your community council. You were out and about meeting people, interviewing people, face to face, and I suppose then all of it just kind of changes to a slightly bigger scale. When I went to Ayr, there was a sheriff court, and you were covering the local city council at the time. So it just all gets a little bit grander, but I think that's what prepares you for then eventually, you know, if you do get a job in the nationals, you know, when you're sent down to the High Court to cover something. But for me, you know, the weeklies, and I did really enjoy it. And you meet some characters, some of which I still, you know, phone up today if something happens, you know, because obviously we're in a, you know, Scotland-wide role at the moment. So if something happens, and I've still got these guys in my old contacts book, you know, phone up and you know, happily remember me. So it's also a great way of starting that idea of, you know, building your contacts, people that will trust you, you know, people that you can go to for a story, knowing, you know, you've got trustworthy sources as well, and also, you know, I think also, you know, enjoying it is part of it as well.
Thank you.
Any others? Donald, yeah, on you go.
Just a quick one, and it's probably a bit of a cliche question, but is there anything you'd change about your career? Anything you've done, anything that you thought was maybe the wrong move at the time or anything? Or do you think everything happens for a reason and all that?
Yes, I know, maybe it does happen for a reason. I can remember a long time ago, and I was in weeklies at the time, but I had this massive interest in motorsport, and I can remember there used to be like job adverts in Autosport for I think the way into it then would have been to have covered, you know, to have been the hill climb correspondent, you know, in the north of England or something. And I just think, would that be the way to start? Would that then get me to Formula One? But fortunately, I was enjoying what I was doing too much, you know, in the news side of things, that I didn't pursue that. So I suppose that could be my one big regret, is that, you know, I'm now not covering Formula One all over the world. But I don't regret it, because I have loved, you know, being a journalist in Glasgow and across Scotland, because I think we are a hugely competitive market. I think there is great opportunities here. You know, whether it be in, you know, newspapers, digital, you know, TV, etc., or radio, you know, there are great opportunities here, and, you know, fantastically amount of talented journalists in Scotland.